The night my son-in-law told me to disappear, everyone else at the table kept eating. No one dropped their fork. No one said my name. No one even looked shocked. They just stared down at their plates as if the mashed potatoes suddenly mattered more than I did. And that's when I realized something terrifying. This wasn't a cruel joke. This wasn't anger in the moment. This was something they had already talked about, planned, agreed on. Because when he said those words, calm, smiling, raising his glass like he was making a wedding toast, my own daughter didn't defend me. She nodded. And in that exact second, something inside my chest didn't break. It went completely silent. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my story of betrayal, and if you've ever trusted the wrong person, hit that subscribe button because you are not alone. Here is how it happened. I was reading comments on my YouTube videos the other day, and I realized I wasn't the only one who had been quietly erased from their own family. People wrote things like, "They didn't kick me out, they just slowly made me invisible." That word, invisible, stuck with me because that's exactly what happened to me. But it didn't start with cruelty. It started with love. It began the day my daughter introduced him. She was glowing, the kind of glow you only see when someone believes they've found their forever person. Her voice was softer than usual when she said his name. Her eyes searched my face for approval before she even finished speaking, and I gave it immediately, because that's what mothers do. We trust the people our children trust. He shook my hand firmly, looked me straight in the eyes, called me ma'am in a respectful tone that made me think this young man was raised right. He even brought flowers for me, not for my daughter, for me. And that small gesture won my heart instantly. I thought, he understands how important family is. I didn't realize at the time that was the first move. At first, everything seemed perfect. He helped carry groceries without being asked, fixed the broken cabinet in my kitchen, remembered my birthday without reminders, asked about my health like he genuinely cared. He would say things like, "Your daughter is the amazing woman she is because of you." And I believed him, every word. I even told my friends proudly, I didn't just gain a son-in-law, I gained a son. Looking back now, that sentence feels like a knife twisting slowly, because predators don't show their teeth at the beginning, they smile. The changes were so small I almost didn't notice. It started with little jokes. "Your mom worries too much. She's a bit old-fashioned. She means well, but she doesn't understand modern life." He always laughed when he said, so everyone else laughed too, including my daughter. At first, I laughed with them because I thought it was harmless, but slowly I noticed something. Whenever I gave advice, he would interrupt. Whenever I spoke, he would redirect the conversation. Whenever I visited, he found a reason to leave the room. Not rudely, just strategically, like someone rearranging furniture so a piece no longer fits. Then came the real sign. One evening, my daughter told me softly, "Mom, maybe you shouldn't come over unannounced anymore." Her voice wasn't angry. It was rehearsed, careful, like someone had repeated words someone else had given her. I felt a strange chill in my chest because this was the same girl who used to run into my room after nightmares, who once told me, "You're my safe place." Now she was building distance, and I could feel someone guiding her hand. The wedding preparations changed everything. He took control of everything, the guest list, the venue, the seating arrangements, even the speeches. One day, my daughter nervously told me, "Mom, maybe you shouldn't give a speech at the wedding." I blinked. "Why?" She hesitated, then whispered, "He says it would make things emotional." Emotional? At a wedding? From a mother? That was the first moment I truly felt something was wrong, but I still didn't fight because I told myself, don't ruin her happiness. That thought became my prison. The night of the engagement dinner, that was when everything shattered. We were seated at a long table in a private restaurant room. Candles flickered softly. Everyone looked elegant, happy, relaxed. He stood up with a glass in his hand, smiling, calm, confident. He cleared his throat and said, "There's only one gift I truly want for our wedding." Everyone leaned in, smiling. My daughter reached for his hand. He looked directly at me, held my gaze, and then said, "The greatest gift for our wedding is if you disappear from our family." The room went silent. Not shocked silent, not confused silent, prepared silent, because no one reacted, not even my daughter. And in that frozen moment, I realized something even more horrifying than his words. They had already decided. I just hadn't been told yet. For a moment after he said it, I genuinely thought I had misheard, because no human being says something like that calmly, not at a celebration, not while smiling. But he didn't look nervous. He didn't look guilty. He looked relieved, as if he had finally spoken something he had been holding back for a long time. I felt every eye in the room carefully avoiding mine. Glasses clinked softly. Someone coughed. A fork scraped against a plate. Normal sounds in an extremely abnormal moment. I waited for my daughter to speak. Just one word. "Stop. That's not funny. Don't talk to my mother like that." Anything. But she didn't. She squeezed his hand instead and whispered, barely audible, "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder. That word echoed inside me like a hollow drum. Harder for who? For them? Or for me, the woman being quietly erased from her own child's life? I remember how my hands felt. They weren't shaking. They weren't trembling. They felt numb, like they didn't belong to me anymore. I slowly placed my napkin on the table and asked the only question I could manage. Why? My voice sounded calm, almost detached, like I was asking about the weather. He leaned forward, folding his hands politely, as if explaining a business decision. "Because," he said gently, "we want a peaceful life, a new start, and your presence creates tension." Tension. The word hit me harder than a slap. I had spent my entire life protecting my daughter from tension, from hardship, from loneliness. I worked double shifts when she was little so she could attend a better school. I stayed up nights when she was sick. I sold my wedding jewelry once to help pay her college fees. And now, I was being described as the problem? My daughter finally looked at me. Her eyes were glossy, but not from anger, from guilt, which somehow hurt more. "Mom," she said softly, "we're not saying we don't love you." That sentence alone shattered something deep inside me, because when someone begins with "we still love you," it always means they're about to take something away. She continued, "We just think it would be healthier if you stepped back. No visits, no calls, no involvement in our life decisions." Each word felt like a door closing, one by one, until there was nothing left open. I searched her face desperately, looking for the little girl I knew, the one who used to cry when I left for work, the one who once told me, "When I grow up, I'll take care of you the way you take care of me." But I couldn't find her. All I saw was someone trying to please the man sitting beside her, someone afraid of losing him, even if it meant losing me. "Is this what you want?" I asked her quietly. Not him, her, because his answer didn't matter. only hers did. She didn't reply immediately. Her silence lasted just long enough to break my heart completely. Then she nodded, just once, small, slow, final. And in that instant, I understood something devastating. This wasn't his decision alone. She had chosen it too. Something strange happened inside me then. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't argue, because when betrayal cuts deep enough, it doesn't cause noise. It causes emptiness, a cold, quiet emptiness that spreads through your chest until there's nothing left to hold on to. I slowly placed my napkin on the table and asked the only question I could manage: why? My voice sounded calm, almost detached, like I was asking about the weather. He leaned forward, folding his hands politely, as if explaining a business decision. Because, he said gently, we want a peaceful life, a new start, and your presence creates tension. Tension. The word hit me harder than a slap. I had spent my entire life protecting my daughter from tension, from hardship, from loneliness. I worked double shifts when she was little so she could attend a better school. I stayed up nights when she was sick. I sold my wedding jewelry once to help pay her college fees. And now, I was being described as the problem? My daughter finally looked at me. Her eyes were glossy, but not from anger, from guilt, which somehow hurt more. "Mom," she said softly, "we're not saying we don't love you." That sentence alone shattered something deep inside me, because when someone begins with "we still love you," it always means they're about to take something away. She continued, "We just think it would be healthier if you stepped back. No visits, no calls, no involvement in our life decisions." Each word felt like a door closing, one by one, until there was nothing left open. I searched her face desperately, looking for the little girl I knew, the one who used to cry when I left for work, the one who once told me, "When I grow up, I'll take care of you the way you take care of me." But I couldn't find her. All I saw was someone trying to please the man sitting beside her, someone afraid of losing him, even if it meant losing me. "Is this what you want?" I asked her quietly. Not him, her, because his answer didn't matter. Only hers did. She didn't reply immediately. Her silence lasted just long enough to break my heart completely. Then she nodded, just once, small, slow, final. And in that instant, I understood something devastating. This wasn't his decision alone. She had chosen it too. Something strange happened inside me then. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't argue, because when betrayal cuts deep enough, it doesn't cause noise. It causes emptiness, a cold, quiet emptiness that spreads through your chest until there's nothing left to hold on to. I slowly placed my napkin on the table and asked the only question I could manage: why? My voice sounded calm, almost detached, like I was asking about the weather. He leaned forward, folding his hands politely, as if explaining a business decision. "Because," he said gently, "we want a peaceful life, a new start, and your presence creates tension." Tension. The word hit me harder than a slap. I had spent my entire life protecting my daughter from tension, from hardship, from loneliness. I worked double shifts when she was little so she could attend a better school. I stayed up nights when she was sick. I sold my wedding jewelry once to help pay her college fees. And now, I was being described as the problem? My daughter finally looked at me. Her eyes were glossy, but not from anger, from guilt, which somehow hurt more. "Mom," she said softly, "we're not saying we don't love you." That sentence alone shattered something deep inside me, because when someone begins with, "We still love you," it always means they're about to take something away. She continued, "We just think it would be healthier if you stepped back. No visits, no calls, no involvement in our life decisions." Each word felt like a door closing, one by one, until there was nothing left open. I searched her face desperately, looking for the little girl I knew, the one who used to cry when I left for work, the one who once told me, "When I grow up, I'll take care of you the way you take care of me." But I couldn't find her. All I saw was someone trying to please the man sitting beside her, someone afraid of losing him, even if it meant losing me. "Is this what you want?" I asked her quietly. Not him, her, because his answer didn't matter. Only hers did. She didn't reply immediately. Her silence lasted just long enough to break my heart completely. Then she nodded, just once. Small, slow, final. And in that instant, I understood something devastating. This wasn't his decision alone. She had chosen it too. Something strange happened inside me then. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. Because when betrayal cuts deep enough, it doesn't cause noise. It causes emptiness. A cold, quiet emptiness that spreads through your chest until there's nothing left to hold on to. I slowly placed my napkin on the table and asked the only question I could manage. Why? My voice sounded calm, almost detached, like I was asking about the weather. He leaned forward, folding his hands politely, as if explaining a business decision. "Because," he said gently, "we want a peaceful life, a new." The hardest part about disappearing isn't leaving. It's resisting the urge to come back. The first morning after that dinner, I woke up before sunrise out of habit. For years, my days had always begun the same way, making tea, checking my phone, waiting for a message from my daughter. "Good morning, Mom. What are you doing today? Can you send me that recipe?" Little things. Ordinary things. The kind that quietly stitch two lives together. But that morning, my phone screen was blank. No messages, no missed calls, just silence. And that was when it truly began to sink in. They weren't going to reach out, not even out of guilt, because they believed they had done the right thing. The first week was unbearable. I kept reaching for my phone instinctively. When I saw something funny on TV, I almost texted her. When I cooked her favorite dish, I almost sent a photo. When I passed a store window displaying wedding decorations, my chest tightened so painfully I had to stop walking, because I knew I wouldn't be there. Not at the ceremony, not in the photos, not in the memories they would build. It felt like watching my own life continue without me. But I kept my promise. I didn't call, I didn't text, I didn't ask mutual relatives about her. I erased her contact name from my favorites so I wouldn't accidentally press it. Every small action felt like cutting a thread. And slowly, I began to understand something terrifying. When you remove yourself completely, the world doesn't stop. It adjusts, it rearranges, and eventually it learns to function without you. The wedding day came 3 months later. I knew the date because it was burned into my memory. I didn't receive an invitation, not even out of politeness, which hurt more than I expected because it meant they weren't just setting boundaries, they were rewriting the story, a story where I had no place. That day, I stayed home. I turned off my phone, closed the curtains, and tried to keep myself busy, but the silence in my house felt louder than any celebration. I imagined the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. I imagined my daughter walking down the aisle in a white dress, and I wondered, did she look for me in the crowd, even for a second, Or had she trained herself not to? Around evening, something strange happened. I didn't cry. I expected to. I thought I would collapse under the weight of it, but instead, I felt something unexpected. Calm. Not happiness, not relief, but a quiet acceptance, like the final page of a chapter closing. And for the first time since that dinner, I realized something. I was still alive. My world had ended in one way, but I still had time, still had breath, still had choices. And maybe, just maybe, disappearing from their life didn't mean disappearing from my own. That thought changed everything. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I left my house, not for errands, not for obligations, but simply to walk. The air felt different, lighter. I noticed things I hadn't paid attention to before: the smell of coffee from a cafe, the sound of children laughing in a park, the warmth of sunlight on my face. For years, my identity had been tied to being someone's mother. Now, suddenly, I was just me, and that felt frightening, but also strangely freeing. Slowly, I began rebuilding a routine. I joined a small book club at the local library. I started attending morning yoga classes, even though I felt awkward at first. I reconnected with an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. And for the first time in decades, I started making decisions without thinking about how they would affect my daughter. That realization was bittersweet because it showed me how much of myself I had quietly sacrificed over the years. Not because she demanded it, but because I believed that was what love required. Months passed, seasons changed, and something unexpected happened. The pain didn't disappear, but it became like an old scar, still there, still sensitive, but no longer bleeding. I learned to laugh again, to sleep without replaying memories, to go entire days without thinking about them, and every time that happened, I felt both proud and guilty. Proud because I was healing, guilty because it felt like I was moving on. Nearly a year went by with no contact, no calls, no messages, nothing, and I began to believe that this was permanent, that I would live the rest of my life without ever seeing my daughter again, that she had fully chosen her new family over me. It was a painful thought, but I had learned to live with it. Then one evening, everything changed. I was sitting at home reading when my phone suddenly rang. The sound startled me so much I nearly dropped it because I had grown so used to silence that an unexpected call felt like an alarm. I looked at the screen and my heart stopped. It was her name, my daughter, calling for the first time in 11 months. My hands began to shake so violently I could barely hold the phone. 1,000 thoughts rushed through my mind at once. Is she calling to apologize? Is something wrong? Did she finally realize what she lost? Or worse, was she calling only because she needed something? The phone kept ringing. Each second felt like a lifetime. I stared at her name glowing on the screen, the same name I had once seen every single day. Now it looked unfamiliar, almost foreign. And in that moment, I realized something deeply unsettling. I didn't know whether to answer, because answering meant opening a door I had spent nearly a year trying to close. My thumb hovered over the screen, and my heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears, because I knew whatever she said next would change everything again. And when I finally answered the call, the first words she spoke were something I never expected to hear. My thumb trembled as I pressed the green button. For a second, I couldn't even bring the phone to my ear because I knew that once I heard her voice, all the walls I had spent nearly a year building inside myself might collapse in an instant. Still, I forced myself to breathe. Slowly. Then I whispered, "Hello?" There was silence on the other end. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, the kind that feels heavy, like someone is holding their breath. And then I heard her. "Mom?" Her voice cracked on the word, and that single sound, that familiar, fragile sound, sent a sharp ache through my chest, because no matter how much time passes, a mother always recognizes her child's voice. But something was different. She didn't sound confident. She didn't sound calm. She sounded afraid, the kind of fear that seeps into your voice when you don't know what to do next. "Mom, I don't know if I should be calling you," she said quietly. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I couldn't speak because that sentence alone revealed everything. She wasn't calling because she had suddenly remembered me. She was calling because something had gone wrong. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You already called," I said gently. "Tell me what happened." There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing unevenly. Then she whispered something that made my heart drop. "I made a mistake." Those 4 words echoed inside me because they weren't the words of someone casually reaching out. They were the words of someone standing in the middle of a storm. "Is he there?" I asked softly. She didn't answer immediately, and that silence told me everything. Then I heard a faint sound, like a door closing in the background. "He's not home," she said finally. Her voice lowered, almost like she was afraid someone might hear her. And suddenly a cold realization crept into my mind. She wasn't just upset, she was hiding. "Are you safe?" I asked quickly. The instinct slipped out before I could stop it, because instinct doesn't disappear. No matter how much someone hurts you, when they're in danger, you forget everything else. Another pause. Longer this time. Then she whispered, "I don't know." Those words hit harder than anything she had said before, because uncertainty like that doesn't come from small problems. It comes from fear, real fear. My hands tightened around the phone. "What happened?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She inhaled shakily. "At first, everything was perfect," she said. "And then, slowly, he started changing." The exact same words I had once used to describe him. My stomach twisted, because in that moment, I knew exactly where this story was going. She continued in a broken voice. "He doesn't like me talking to people anymore. Not my friends, not coworkers. He says they're a bad influence." Each sentence sounded painfully familiar because it was the same pattern I'd watched unfold with me. Isolate, control, redefine reality. "He checks my phone," she whispered. "He gets angry if I go out without telling him exactly where I am." Her voice shook harder now. "And last night?" She stopped. Her breathing became uneven. I felt my heart pounding. "What happened last night?" I asked gently. Her next words came out like a fragile confession. "He threw a glass across the room because I mentioned your name." Time seemed to stop. My grip on the phone tightened so hard my fingers hurt. "Did it hit you?" I asked immediately. "No," she whispered. "But he said if I ever contacted you again, he would make sure I regretted it." A cold chill spread through my entire body, because threats like that aren't empty, they're warnings. For a moment, I couldn't speak, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I felt a storm of emotions crashing inside me all at once. Fear, anger, pain, and something I didn't expect, a quiet, aching sadness, because I realized something devastating. Everything I had once sensed about him, everything I had tried to ignore for her happiness, had been true. "Mom," she said weakly, "I'm sorry." Those words finally broke something inside me, because they weren't defensive, they weren't forced, they were raw, genuine, filled with regret. "I should have listened to you," she continued, "but I thought you were trying to control my life." Her voice cracked again. I didn't realize he was the one doing that. Tears finally slipped down my face. Silent, hot, unstoppable, but not from anger, from grief, because I wasn't crying for the past anymore. I was crying for the present, for the girl who had once chosen someone else over me and was now trapped in a life she didn't know how to escape. "Mom," she said weakly, "I'm sorry." Those words finally broke something inside me because they weren't defensive, they weren't forced, they were raw, genuine, filled with regret. "I should have listened to you," she continued, "but I thought you were trying to control my life." Her voice cracked again. "I didn't realize he was the one doing that." Tears finally slipped down my face. Silent, hot, unstoppable, but not from anger, from grief, because I wasn't crying for the past anymore. I was crying for the present, for the girl who had once chosen someone else over me and was now trapped in a life she didn't know how to escape. "Mom," she said weakly, "I'm sorry." Those words finally broke something inside me because they weren't defensive, they weren't forced, they were raw, genuine, filled with regret. "I should have listened to you," she continued, "but I thought you were trying to control my life." Her voice cracked again. "I didn't realize he was the one doing that." Tears finally slipped down my face. Silent, hot, unstoppable, but not from anger, from grief, because I wasn't crying for the past anymore. I was crying for the present, for the girl who had once chosen someone else over me and was now trapped in a life she didn't know how to escape. "Mom," she said weakly, "I'm sorry." Those words finally broke something inside me because they weren't defensive, they weren't forced, they were raw, genuine, filled with regret. "I should have listened to you," she continued, "but I thought you were trying to control my life." Her voice cracked again. "I didn't realize he was the one doing that." Tears finally slipped down my face. Silent, hot, unstoppable, but not from anger, from grief, because I wasn't crying for the past anymore. I was crying for the present, for the girl who had once chosen someone else over me and was now trapped in a life she didn't know how to escape. "Mom," she said weakly, "I'm sorry." Those words finally broke something inside me because they weren't defensive, they weren't forced, they were raw, genuine, filled with regret. "I should have listened to you," she continued, "but I thought you were trying to control my life." Her voice cracked again. "I didn't realize he was the one doing that." Tears finally slipped down my face. Silent, hot, unstoppable, but not from anger, from grief, because I wasn't crying for the past anymore. I was crying for the present, for the girl who had once chosen someone else over me and was now trapped in a life she didn't know how to escape. "Mom," she said weakly, "I'm sorry." Those words finally broke something inside me because they weren't defensive, they weren't forced, they were raw, genuine, filled with regret. "I should have listened to you," she continued, "but I thought you were trying to control my life." Her voice cracked again. "I didn't realize he was the one doing that." Tears finally slipped down my face. Silent, hot, unstoppable, but not from anger, from grief, because I wasn't crying for the past anymore. I was crying for the present, for the girl who had once chosen someone else over me and was now trapped in a life she didn't know how to escape. "Mom," she said weakly, "I'm sorry." Those words finally broke something inside me because they weren't defensive, they weren't forced, they were raw, genuine, filled with regret. "I should have listened to you," she continued, "but I thought you were trying to control my life." Her voice cracked again. "I didn't realize he was the one doing that." Tears finally slipped down my face. silent, hot, unstoppable, but not from anger, from grief, because I wasn't crying for the past anymore. I was crying for the present, for the girl who had once chosen someone else over me and was now trapped in a life she didn't know how to escape. "Mom," she said weakly, "I'm sorry." Those words finally broke something inside me because they weren't defensive, they weren't forced. The moment the line went dead, I knew something was terribly wrong. At first, I thought maybe the call it simply dropped. Maybe the signal failed. Maybe she hung up quickly to avoid being caught. But deep inside, I knew better. Because the last sound I heard before the silence wasn't static. It was fear. Raw, sudden fear. I tried calling her back immediately. Once, twice, 5 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. Her phone had been turned off or taken away. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. For nearly a year, I had trained myself to live without hearing from her. But now, the silence felt completely different. Before, it had been chosen. Now, it felt forced, and that made it terrifying. My mind raced with possibilities. What if he found out she called me? What if he was angry? What if he hurt her? Every worst-case scenario flooded my thoughts. I paced my living room, unable to sit still, because doing nothing felt unbearable. Yet, I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know their exact address anymore. They had moved shortly after the wedding, and I had respected their wish to stay away, which now felt like a cruel mistake. I called the only person who might know, my niece, her cousin. They had remained in occasional contact, even after my daughter cut ties with me. When she answered, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Do you know where she lives now?" I asked. There was a pause. Then she said cautiously, "Why? What happened?" I hesitated, because saying it out loud would make it real, but I forced the words out. "I think she's in trouble." Within minutes, my niece sent me the address. My hands trembled as I wrote it down, because now I had a choice to make, a choice that felt painfully ironic. For nearly a year, I had respected their demand that I disappear from their lives. Now, I had to decide whether to break that promise. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if she doesn't want me to show up? What if I make things worse? What if he becomes more violent because of me? But then I remembered her voice, the fear, the helplessness, and the way she had whispered, "I don't know what to do." That memory silenced every hesitation, because there are moments in life when doing nothing becomes the greatest danger. I grabbed my coat and keys. My heart pounded as I stepped outside. The night air felt sharp against my skin, cold, unforgiving. It matched the storm raging inside me. The drive felt endless. Every red light seemed to last too long. Every minute stretched painfully, because all I could think was, please be safe, please still be okay. When I finally reached their apartment building, my stomach dropped. It was dark. Most windows were unlit, except one. On the 3rd floor, a faint yellow light flickered inside, and something about that single glowing window filled me with dread, because it felt like a warning. I stood outside for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. I didn't know what I would find upstairs. Anger, denial, violence, or maybe nothing at all. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't walk away. Not this time. My hands shook as I climbed the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. When I reached their door, I froze, because suddenly I could hear voices inside. His voice, loud, sharp, furious. And hers? Soft, pleading. The sound of it sent a chill through my entire body because I recognized that tone instantly. It was the same voice she used as a child when she was terrified. I moved closer to the door, not meaning to eavesdrop, but unable to stop myself. His words became clear. "I told you not to contact her," he shouted. "I told you she is poison in our lives." My heart clenched painfully. Poison. That was what he had reduced me to. And suddenly, I understood something deeply disturbing. He hadn't just wanted distance, he wanted total control. Then I heard a loud crash inside, something breaking, followed by her cry. Not loud, not dramatic, but filled with pure fear. And that sound snapped something inside me instantly. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I raised my hand and knocked hard on the door. Once, twice, 3 times. The voices inside stopped abruptly. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Heavy footsteps approached, slow, deliberate. The door swung open, and there he stood, my son-in-law. His face stiffened the moment he saw me. Shock flashed in his eyes. Then anger, cold, burning anger. "You," he said sharply, "what are you doing here?" I looked past him into the apartment, and what I saw made my heart shatter. My daughter stood near the wall, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. A broken glass lay shattered beside her. And in that moment, I realized the truth I had been afraid to face. This wasn't just an unhappy marriage. This was something far more dangerous. He stepped forward, trying to block the doorway. "You're not welcome here," he said coldly. "Leave." But for the first time since that dinner long ago, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel weak. I felt something entirely different. Fierce, protective, unshakable. Because now, this wasn't about pride or betrayal or past pain. This was about safety. I met his gaze steadily and spoke in a calm, firm voice he had never heard from me before. "I'm not leaving without my daughter." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and the way his eyes darkened in response told me something terrifying. He wasn't going to let her go easily. And what happened next would become the most dangerous confrontation of my life. The tension in the doorway felt almost unbearable. He was bigger than me, taller, broader, but I didn't flinch. Every instinct screamed to protect my daughter, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. "I said leave," he repeated, his voice low and dangerous. I took a slow step forward. "I'm not leaving. Not without her. Not this time." For a moment, he simply stared at me, his eyes narrowed. There was a flicker of calculation, like he was weighing whether I was a threat or just an obstacle he could remove. Behind him, my daughter trembled. I could see the fear etched into every line of her face. Her arms were wrapped around herself as if trying to hold herself together, but when she caught my eye, there was a flicker of hope, a tiny spark that said she knew I would fight for her. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, voice barely audible. He's dangerous." "I know, and I won't let him hurt you." Her hands clutched mine through the small gap between the doorway and the wall. I had never felt her hold me like this before, not in years. It was raw, desperate, and completely unfiltered. He stepped closer. The air between us seemed to thicken. "You don't belong here," he hissed. "You never did." "I belonged when she was a child, and I belong now because I am the only person who will protect her from people like you," I replied firmly. He laughed, but it was short, sharp, almost manic. Protect. You've been nothing but poison. You wanted her to leave me. You wanted control. You've been the problem all along. The accusation hit like a punch, but I didn't respond emotionally. I let the words land, cold, sharp, but irrelevant, because now action mattered more than argument. He raised his hand suddenly, not a gesture of threat, but of warning. Step back, or I'll make you regret it. I didn't step back. I advanced a fraction closer, just enough to make him hesitate. Do you want to control me? I asked, voice steady but low. Try controlling the woman you married, because I control nothing except making sure she gets out of this safely. The moment hung between us, taut like a bowstring ready to snap. Then she spoke. Stop, she shouted, her voice breaking through the tension. Stop fighting, both of you. And in that instant, everything changed. He hesitated. For a flicker of a second, his focus wavered. That second was all I needed. I took her hand and moved past him. He lunged slightly, but I held my ground. My daughter followed without hesitation. We made it to the stairwell. The air was cold, metallic. The echo of our footsteps filled the silent hallway. But I could hear him behind us. Stop! Get back here! I kept moving, faster now. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might explode. You need to leave, he yelled, voice cracking now with anger. But I didn't look back, because I knew something crucial. If I hesitated even for a second, he could overpower me. And this wasn't just about pride. This was about survival. We reached the street. Night had fully fallen. The streetlights flickered, casting long, jagged shadows. My daughter's hand was trembling in mine, but she was moving, trusting me. We turned the corner quickly, and I noticed a convenience store open on the next block. I pulled her inside, just to put a small barrier between us and him. She leaned against the counter, gasping for breath. I could feel her heart pounding, her body shaking. I held her close. It's okay, I whispered. You're safe now. We're going to make sure of it. But even as we caught our breath, a new fear settled in, because we weren't truly safe yet. He knew where she lived, he knew where I lived, and if he wanted to, he could find us again. I had to think, fast. I called the one person I trusted implicitly, my old friend who lived several towns away and had always been my anchor in crisis. Listen carefully, I said as soon as she answered. I need help. My daughter, she's in danger. We need a place to hide for tonight. There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. Don't move. I hung up, turned to my daughter, and whispered, we're going somewhere safe, just for tonight. After that, we plan our next move. The drive was tense. My daughter didn't speak. She just stared out the window, eyes wide and haunted. I wanted to say something comforting, but words felt empty. So I simply drove. Every turn, every streetlight, every shadow made me alert. Every time a car passed too slowly, I flinched. For the first time in years, I realized fear could be almost tangible. You could feel it pressing against your chest. When we finally arrived at my friend's house, relief crashed over me in waves. Her house was warm, welcoming, and quiet, safe. I let my daughter sit on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. I sat next to her and held her hand. I'm here, I said softly. No one's touching you now. Not him, not anyone, I promise. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Some things only silence can express. That night, we talked. We shared everything, every fear, every secret, every detail she hadn't told me before, the way he controlled her, the threats, the isolation, the fear she had lived with silently for months. I listened, and as I listened, I realized something. Disappearing from their lives had been the only way to protect myself, but showing up when she needed me had been the truest form of love I could offer. Because love isn't always gentle. Sometimes love is fierce, and sometimes it's the only thing standing between someone you love and danger. But even as dawn approached, I knew this was far from over. We were safe tonight, yes, but tomorrow, decisions had to be made. Calls to the police, legal action, protective measures, and most importantly, reclaiming her life from the man who had tried to erase us both. Because disappearing was my choice. Showing up to protect her wasn't just instinct, it was a battle I was ready to fight. And in that quiet morning, sitting with my daughter wrapped in my arms, I made a vow. I will never allow fear to silence love. Not again. Not for her. Not for me. The next morning, the world felt heavy with possibility and danger all at once. The sun rose, spilling light into my friend's kitchen, but the warmth couldn't reach the icy knot in my stomach. My daughter sat across from me, still quiet, still fragile. I could see the fear lingering behind her eyes, the kind that doesn't simply disappear with safety, it festers. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "He'll find me. He'll find us." I reached across the table and took her hands in mine. They were cold, trembling, yet alive, which was all that mattered. "Listen to me," I said firmly. "You are not alone, not now, not ever. He may have tried to erase you, but he can't erase the bond we share. He has no control here." She nodded, but I knew she wasn't convinced. The truth was, I wasn't either. He was smart, manipulative, dangerous, and we had no idea what he might do next. We started planning. The first step was securing a safe location for the foreseeable future. We couldn't risk staying in one place too long. My friend had suggested a secure cabin she knew of in the woods, far from the city. The drive there would be long and treacherous, but it would be worth it. "Do you think he'll come after us?" my daughter asked quietly. I hesitated. Honesty was the only way to prepare her. "If he tries, we're ready, but we have to stay calm and make sure we're always 2 steps ahead." She shivered, but nodded again. That nod felt like a small victory. She was starting to believe escape was possible. Packing was silent but urgent. We gathered only what we needed: clothes, medications, important documents. I grabbed her favorite blanket, something that would remind her of home amidst all the chaos. Every sound outside the house made us jump. Every passing car felt like a potential threat. Before leaving, I checked the locks on all the doors. I checked the windows. I checked one last time that she had everything she needed. "Ready?" I asked softly. She took a deep breath. "Yes, let's go." And with that, we stepped into the morning light, leaving behind the apartment that had been both her home and her prison. The drive to the cabin was tense. Every mile we covered was a mixture of hope and fear. I kept one eye on the rearview mirror, expecting him to appear at any moment. My daughter kept her head down, silent, gripping the blanket in her lap. We didn't speak much. Words felt unnecessary. The silence itself was a shield, a way to stay alert without giving away any sign of vulnerability. I kept imagining what might happen if he did find us. Would he confront us openly? Would he try something more subtle, threats over the phone, intimidation through messages? The possibilities were terrifying, but planning for them made me feel in control, however slightly. About halfway there, we saw something that froze us. A black SUV appeared in the rearview mirror, far behind us at first, then gradually closer. My heart slammed into my chest. "He's following us," I whispered. My daughter's hands gripped mine under the blanket. I could feel her panic, but I forced myself to remain calm. Panic wouldn't save us, strategy would. I took a deep breath, scanning the road ahead. There was a small turnoff a few miles ahead that led to a secondary route through the forest. It was narrow, poorly lit, but it might be our only chance to lose him. "Hold on tight," I said. "We're taking a detour, trust me." She nodded, eyes wide. As we turned off the main road, my heart raced. The SUV followed, faster now, close enough that I could see its headlights glaring through the trees. My mind raced. Every scenario I had imagined played out in thousands of variations. Then, instinct took over. I accelerated, hugging the curves of the narrow road, dodging potholes and fallen branches. The SUV mirrored every move. He was relentless, determined, dangerous. "This road leads to the river," I muttered to myself. "If I can get him to follow, he won't be able to keep up without drawing attention." My daughter held on to the blanket, white-knuckled, eyes wide with terror. I whispered to her, "You're safe. I'm not letting anything happen to you. Not today, not ever." The forest road twisted unpredictably. Every turn, every sudden curve was a gamble. I could hear the SUV behind us, the engine growling like a predator closing in on its prey. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly they hurt. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run faster, to escape, to survive. Then, just as I had planned, I reached a fork near the river. One path led to a bridge with a narrow passage barely wide enough for a single car. The other fork led to a dead-end road lined with thick trees. I chose the dead end. He followed. I didn't know if he expected this. I didn't know if he realized the consequences, but he followed just as I had hoped. I turned sharply into a clearing near the riverbank. Rocks, mud, and tree roots made the terrain treacherous for a standard vehicle. The SUV skidded, tires squealing. My heart pounded. The bridge loomed to one side. I realized suddenly, if the SUV tried to follow over the bridge, it could easily slip into the river. I kept my foot on the accelerator, maneuvering carefully. My daughter clutched the seat, trembling, and I whispered to her, "Just a little further, almost there, we're going to be safe." He stopped. I could see him through the trees, headlights cutting through the darkness. His figure was tense, angry, furious, but the terrain had slowed him down, and he knew it. I parked the car, engine idling, and pulled my daughter close. "Stay behind me," I said. He didn't move immediately. He called out, shouting her name, promising consequences. But I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. Because I had made my decision. No one threatens my child and gets away with it. Slowly, we moved into the woods. The river was to our left, the forest thick all around us. I kept low, moving silently with my daughter close behind. Every step was careful, deliberate. I didn't dare look back. Finally, we reached a hidden path I had scouted years ago on a hiking trip with friends. It wound deeper into the woods, away from roads and prying eyes. We ran through it, the sounds of the SUV fading behind us. Every branch we brushed against, every leaf crunching underfoot reminded me that freedom was not given. It had to be earned. Hours later, we reached the cabin, safe, finally safe. The door closed behind us, the lock clicked, and a fragile peace settled over the two of us. My daughter collapsed on the bed, exhausted, trembling. I sat beside her, holding her close, stroking her hair. "You're safe now," I whispered. "We made it. You're safe." She buried her face in my chest and sobbed uncontrollably. And as I held her, I realized something profound. Disappearing from her life had been painful. Watching her be manipulated and controlled was agonizing, but showing up when she needed me had reminded me of why I was her mother, why love is more than sacrifice, why some battles cannot be avoided. That night, we talked strategy. We would call the authorities at first light, secure a restraining order, inform close family, create a plan for her long-term safety. We were no longer playing by his rules. And in that moment, I understood something crucial. The greatest gift a mother can give her child isn't always material. It's protection. It's love that refuses to be silenced. It's showing up even when it's terrifying, even when the odds feel impossible. The next steps would be dangerous, unpredictable, life-changing. But we were ready. Because sometimes disappearing is necessary to survive, but showing up at the right moment can save everything that truly matters. The first light of dawn broke through the cabin windows, painting the walls in soft shades of gold and pink. My daughter was asleep on the couch, wrapped in the blanket I had carried from her apartment. I watched her, heart aching, mind replaying the events of the past year. The betrayal, the silence, the fear, and now the fragile glimmer of hope. I realized that life had a cruel way of testing us. Sometimes those we trust the most are the ones who wound us deepest. But it is precisely in those moments of pain that strength is born, not the kind that is loud or boastful, but the quiet, unyielding strength of survival in love. Morning came, with decisions. We had no time to waste. The threats he had made were real. The danger he represented was not imaginary. And the truth was clear. If we were going to reclaim her life, we had to act decisively. I made a list of priorities. Contact the authorities and file a report detailing the abuse, harassment, and threats. Secure a legal restraining order. Find a permanent, safe location for her, a place he could never reach. Rebuild her confidence and autonomy so she could stand without fear in her own life. Each step was daunting but necessary, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't in months: control. My daughter awoke slowly, eyes red, hair tousled. "Mom," she whispered, voice barely audible. "I know," I said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I know it's scary, but we're going to fix this. We're going to make sure he never controls you again." She nodded. For the first time, I saw something in her eyes other than fear: determination. The same fire I remembered from when she was a little girl, the same spark that had always made her resilient, was flickering back to life. And I knew in that moment, our battle was not just about escape, it was about reclaiming life itself. The authorities were professional and swift. We gave detailed statements. They listened carefully, asking questions, taking notes, and assuring us that steps would be taken immediately. Restraining orders were filed. Officers advised on additional security measures, including changing her phone number, varying our routines, and creating emergency contacts. Every detail I provided was a shield, every piece of evidence a weapon. And in that room, I realized a profound truth. When someone tries to erase you, you must become louder, you must become visible, you must refuse to vanish quietly, because silence protects only those who wield it, not those who suffer under it. Weeks passed, and the tension began to ease. The restraining order was served. His calls and messages were blocked. His attempts to manipulate her friends and coworkers were intercepted. Slowly, carefully, we built walls of protection that he could not penetrate. And through it all, I watched my daughter regain her strength. She began to speak her mind again, laugh again, and reclaim her life one small moment at a time. It was not instant, it was not easy. Healing never is. But each day she grew stronger, and each day I felt a quiet pride swelling in my chest, a pride that came not from winning battles, but from surviving them together. And in the silence of one evening, I reflected on the journey. I thought of the dinner where he had demanded I disappear. I thought of the months of isolation, of my own heartache, and of the choices I had made. Disappearing had been painful, yes, but it had also been a lesson in patience, a lesson in discernment, and a lesson in knowing when to fight and when to step back. Because love is not always loud. Sometimes love waits, sometimes love watches, and sometimes love returns with a force that cannot be ignored. My daughter looked at me that night with eyes that reflected something she had not felt in months: safety. "Mom," she whispered. "Yes," I replied. I don't know what I would have done without you." I pulled her close. "You would have survived," I said softly, "but together we're unstoppable." Her arms wrapped around me tightly, and in that embrace, I realized something essential. Our bond could never be broken, not by fear, not by betrayal, not by anyone who tries to erase us. And the moral of this story became crystal clear. Life will sometimes place people in your path who wish to diminish you, manipulate you, or remove you from the lives of those you love. And at first, it may feel impossible to fight back. But disappearing does not mean surrendering entirely. Disappearing can give you the clarity and strength to choose when to act. When the moment comes, the moment when love and courage converge, you show up, fierce, unyielding, unafraid. Because protection is a form of love, presence is a form of power. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give is not silence, not absence, but being exactly where you are needed most. Today, we are free. The fear that once haunted our nights has faded into vigilance, the bond between mother and daughter stronger than ever. The lessons are etched deeply into our hearts. Trust your instincts, honor your love, and never allow anyone to dictate your value or erase your presence from the lives that matter. And in the silence of one evening, I reflected on the journey. I thought of the dinner where he had demanded I disappear. I thought of the months of isolation, of my own heartache, and of the choices I had made. Disappearing had been painful, yes, but it had also been a lesson in patience, a lesson in discernment, and a lesson in knowing when to fight and when to step back. Because love is not always loud. Sometimes love waits, sometimes love watches, and sometimes love returns with a force that cannot be ignored. My daughter looked at me that night with eyes that reflected something she had not felt in months: safety. "Mom," she whispered. "Yes," I replied. I don't know what I would have done without you." I pulled her close. "You would have survived," I said softly, "but together we're unstoppable." Her arms wrapped around me tightly, and in that embrace, I realized something essential. Our bond could never be broken, not by fear, not by betrayal, not by anyone who tries to erase us. And if you ever find yourself in this situation, remember this: disappearing can give you the clarity and strength to choose when to act. When the moment comes, the moment when love and courage converge, you show up, fierce, unyielding, unafraid. Because protection is a form of love, presence is a form of power, and sometimes the greatest gift you can give is not silence, not absence, but being exactly where you are needed most.